All right. It looks like we are live now. Cool. So, welcome back, everybody, to another exciting week of Torah Tuesdays. Yay! The last day of the fiscal year for Mishkan. So this is a nice day for us. It's nice because we actually finished the fiscal year in the black, which is really wonderful. So let's hope that we can do that this coming year too. So either way, we are looking at a double Torah portion today. We're looking at Parshat, actually I should say Chukat Balak, not Chukah. So it should be Chukat Balak. Apologize for that error there. It was an oversight on my behalf. So we're looking at the story of Moses and Aaron hitting the rock and understand exactly what was going on, just so we really can get a sense of what this sin was and why this was such a serious sin that it would be worth punishing them, that Moses would not be allowed to enter into the land of Israel. So it's a lot of text. All the commentary I actually had to translate it myself because it wasn't translated, but I thought it was some of the better commentary, which is why we're looking at that. But in the meantime, we're looking here at the Torah text. So this is coming from this week's Parsha. So this is from the book of Numbers, chapter 20. We're looking at verses 7 through 13 here. And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "You and your brother Aaron take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock, and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts." The reason I keep saying like the rod and the rock, because the Hebrew words there are actually going to be really important, and the commentary is going to be picking up on that. So for instance, the word for the rod, right? It says hamate, the staff or the rod, and then it says the rock, and the word here for rock is sela. Right? So we see right here, sela. Right? We're gonna get a sense of what's going on here. But sela and hamate, those are going to be the important things that we're looking at right here. So Moses took the rod from before Adonai, as God had commanded him. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock?" And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came copious water, and the community and their beasts drank. So here we have God, says, order the rock, right? Or it says, "V'dibartem el hasela, v'dibartem," and you all shall speak to the rock, right? And then instead of speaking, it says, right, they struck the rock. And here it says, et hamate, the staff or the rod. And here it says, b'matehu, with his staff. So not the staff, but his staff. So it's changed a little bit here. It's kind of, we just have to pay close attention to the language that's being used. That's what the rabbis want us to do. Yeah, Carol, you can unmute yourself.
Did Moses even try to just nicely ask the rock for water, or just all of us out of nowhere, he's just getting angry and hitting it?
It would seem he doesn't speak to the rock at all. He just goes to hit it.
Okay.
So, yeah. All right, so we're going to keep going here just a little bit more just to see what's going on. But Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them." Right. It's lo hemantem bi, you didn't believe in me, didn't have faith in me. Lahakdisheni le'nei bnei Yisrael. Lahakdisheni, in order to sanctify me or make me holy in front of the eyes of the people. Right. And this is repeated later in Deuteronomy when God's reminding Moses why he's not able to enter the land. Those are the waters of Meribah, meaning that Israelites quarreled with Adonai. The word riv is an argument. Meribah is going to be a place where one argues or it's another word for argument. So here we have this: Israelites quarreled with Adonai, and through which God affirmed God's sanctity. And yeah, okay. So this is everything with this first story. Now, students of the Torah who look closely at it will know, maybe it's not such a bad thing what Moses did, because after all, previously, God instructed Moses to take the staff and strike the rock to bring out water. Right? So he just did exactly what God had told him to do last time. So is it really such a terrible thing? So let's take a closer look at the last time this happened to understand really what the difference is that's going on here. So this is going back to Parshat Bishalach. So right at this is the very end of the commandments, when the Israelites, not at the end of the commandments, end of the plagues, when the Israelites finally leave Egypt, and here they're in the desert, they need some water, and they ask Moses, give us water, we're dying of thirst. And he's like, oh God, you're such a nudnik, all you ever do is fetch. So here's what God says to Moses here. Then Adonai said to Moses, pass before the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take along the rod. Right? And here it says, right, matcha asher hikita. But here it doesn't say, it really should say, take your rod, not the rod. Here the Hebrew is matcha, your rod, with which you struck the Nile and set out. I will be standing there before you on the rock at Horeb, which is another name for Sinai. And here the word is hatsur, al-hatsur, not sela, but sur. So the different word that is employed to mean rock. Right? V'hikita batsur, and you shall strike the rock, and water will issue from it, and the people will drink. Right? And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. The place was named Massah and Meribah. Right? So maybe this one's Meribah. There's a question, which place is actually known as Meribah? Because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tried or tested Adonai, saying, is Adonai present among us or not? Like, we need some proof that God can actually do this stuff for us. So Amalek, and then just has this complete non sequitur. Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So the place where they currently are is Rephidim. So I want us to get a sense of, a little bit more about these two stories and understand what's going on. The reason I want us to take a closer look at this is because the Malbim spends a lot of time helping us understand the difference between the word sur, which is used in Exodus for a rock, and sela, which is used in Numbers for a rock. And he's going to talk, he doesn't talk about it, but Kli Yakar, who we're also going to look at, speaks about mateh, the staff, and matcha, or matehu, his or your staff. So there's, we're going to be looking closely at this language to really understand what's going on. Any questions before we jump in here? No. Okay, great. Oh yeah, Carol.
Malbim is a commentator. I have not heard that name before.
Malbim is just another rabbinic commentary on the Torah.
Oh, okay.
He's a relatively literal commentator. He's really good at kind of just explaining what's going on, but he does bring in a lot of spiritual and supernatural kind of explanations from time to time as well. He can be very helpful oftentimes when we're looking at the Parsha. So Kli Yakar, who we're going to be looking at also, is probably my favorite commentary on the Torah. He's a few hundred years old. His commentary is already a few hundred years old, but he really does an incredible job of speaking from kind of our modern scientific intellectual mindset. So which is one of the reasons why I really love Kli Yakar. And his Hebrew is pretty easy to understand, usually. Yeah, Phil, you had a question here?
Yeah, it's a more general question. It seems to me that most of the time, the commentators are always trying to justify what in many eyes seems unjustifiable. The fact that an offense of this nature would cause Moses not to be allowed to enter the land, to me seems not only wrong, but seems hypocritical. Do any of the commentators, my first question, do any of them say, God, I think you blew it. I think you blew it in this thing. I think you overreacted. Let's talk about the overreaction of God. Maybe we can learn from God's overreaction because, and this is the other central thing, it seems in many other places, God justifies the ends justify the means. God finds many ways to get angry, to strike people down, to kill people, as we learned last week in the Korach thing. And God is never questioned. Oh, this is just God's way of dealing with it because the ends justify the means. In this case, Moses got the water out of the rock. They don't talk about that the people.
I'm muting you now because I need you to stop. Okay. First of all, it's not really related to what we're looking at here. To address everything, but in short, the rabbis don't question God's decision making because God makes the decisions for whatever reason that God makes the decisions, and it's up to us to understand them, not to find fault in them. All right, we say. God is tsuri velo avla tabo. Tsur, the word here, tsur, God is my rock in whom there is no flaw. So God's not fallible. So if there's anything at fault here, it's our inability to understand the way of God, which we can never understand everything that God does anyways, but we can always strive. And so that's what's going on here. And if we look at, so we'll go through the rest of this and see what Moshe actually did, maybe you'll realize it's not such an unreasonable punishment that he got here. Okay, so Malbim. So again, we're looking about 150 years ago in Ukraine, right, Kiev. So take the staff. To understand the matter of the sin of the waters of Meribah, one needs to start from the beginning. There's a difference between tsur and sela, that the tsur is the hard flint and the sela is a soft limestone. So he's going to explain a little bit more. So, and it is known that within a mountain made of soft, absorbent, and hollow stones, one can find within it springs of water, because rainwater gathers in its cavities and seeps out from within towards its top and then downwards. And sometimes the mouth of the spring lays close to the outside, covered only with a stone that seals it. And when the stone covering the spring is removed, the water seeps outwards, and its spring spreads out in small streams of water. Right? I was hiking this morning over at Temescal with Lev, and we wanted to walk up to the waterfall. And we get all the way up there, and there's a little trickle of water. There still is some water flowing up there, and she wanted to know where the water came from. We haven't had any rain. There isn't snow on the top of the mountain, the hills at Temescal, right? So it's coming from groundwater. There's small little spring towards the top of the mountain, and the water rises up through it and trickles down. And if there's enough water at the right season, there'll be a stronger waterfall. And like now, the end of June, right, that's a tiny little trickle. And in August, it'll probably be nothing. It'll be a completely dry riverbed. But this idea here is that we have certain types of rocks. Within them, we know that there could be water. Right? And certain types of rocks, we know there's definitely no chance of there being water within them at all. And that's this other thing that we call tsur. So the sela is going to be limestone. There's going to be softer, a bunch of smaller little stones gathered together. And the tsur is going to be a larger, thick, huge boulders. And that's what he says here. And that which the text calls tsur is a mountain made of the chalamish, flint stones. And one does not find within it springs of water. And therefore, there's a difference between the water that comes out at Horeb, right, where Moses was instructed to strike it, right? Then there it comes out from its tsur, right? So he had to strike it to be able to get the water out of its tsur, in which no source of internal water is found, and would not be possible to extract water from it except by way of a great miracle. So he's saying that if you have solid boulders that you know there's no way there's actually water in there. If you were to strike it and all of a sudden water comes out, that's pretty miraculous. Versus if you see some, kind of soft ground that you know that there probably could be some, water underneath it, right? So that's what he goes on to say. And now, the text mentions water coming out from the Sela, which is a mountain made from soft stones. This Sela has sources of spring water by way of rainwater found within its cavities. And behold, to extract water from the Sela by way of commanding it, that the fresh water comes out from within it, would require speaking to the Sela and not striking it. For if one struck it with a staff, those who saw wouldn't say it was because God commanded the Sela, but rather because Moses knew the location of the spring source. And when he struck it with his staff, he simply hit aside the rock that was covering its opening. Thereby, the water flows forth. Right? So we're getting a sense of, right, if you know that there's water underneath the ground, possibly that's that type of rock, and somebody strikes that ground, it's not so amazing when water comes out. But if you do that against a giant boulder, a solid boulder, and you strike it, all of a sudden water comes out, that's kind of amazing. But here, if you just speak to the ground, right, that if you were to hit it, right, you know water would come out, but here you just speak and water comes forth, that is pretty amazing, right? How could that actually happen just from using your words, right? That's what's going to be kind of amazing here. He actually goes on from here and says there's an even greater form of miracle that could happen. He goes a completely different direction. I don't really want to get in there. He's really going to the supernatural, which is actually not where I want to go. But he talks about this, and this really helps us understand the difference between a tzur and a sela. Any questions on the difference between tzur and sela before we go on here? Okay, so let's understand a little bit about the regions. So, where did Moses strike the rock? So, looking at Wikipedia, want to get a sense for the different areas. So we know that in Exodus, the Israelites were camped out in Rephidim. That's where they had this request for water when Moses was then instructed to strike the rock. And there the word is tzur, so it's going to be a larger, harder, boulder type rock, something where you don't expect there to be water. So, another proposed location for Rephidim is in northwestern Saudi Arabia, near the town of Al-Bad, the ancient city of Midian. Some researchers suggest that Mount Sinai was not in the Sinai Peninsula, but in Midian, which is modern-day Saudi Arabia, and subsequently placed Rephidim here as well. Jabal Maqla has been the subject of several explorations since the early 80s. To the northwest of this mountain is a large plain and a massive split rock that reportedly shows signs of water erosion. Right? So you have a large rock in a place where you wouldn't expect there to be water, and split in the middle, and there's water erosion. So here we have an etiology helping us possibly understand why this place would be called, Merivah, to give us a background story. Rephidim is also where Moses is recorded striking a rock and water coming from it, right, for the parched Jews. In the area, there's also allegedly Proto-Hebrew inscriptions, some of which say, died Amalekite. Right? So somebody died who was an Amalekite. So if we know that Amalek attacked the Israelites near Rephidim, and here we have some archaeological finds that prove that the Amalekites lived in that region, it makes sense that the area of Al-Bad would be the area of Rephidim. Now, where exactly is Al-Bad? If you're looking at the Red Sea, where you have Israel and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan all kind of like in one little area, you go down maybe half hour, if you could take a Jeep or something right down the coast of Saudi Arabia, a half hour, maybe 45 minutes down that coast, that's where Al-Bad is, just inland a little bit. But it's right there in a relatively narrow area where it would make sense if the Israelites are crossing from Egypt over into the Arabian Peninsula and then going to be wandering through the desert, making their way up into Jordan at some point. It makes sense that that's where they would be. So what is the geography? What is what is the land like at Al-Bad? This area is known for Neolithic petroglyphs carved into the arid volcanic rock. Volcanic rock, not necessarily things that we associate with water being within them. Northeast of the town is the peak Jabal al-Lawz, which at 8,400 feet is one of the highest peaks in Saudi Arabia. The mountain Jabal Makla is to the south of Jabal al-Lawz. This 7,600-foot volcanic peak is, like Jabal al-Lawz, crowned with black basalt. Much of this volcanic region is granite, and vegetation is sparse grassland with the occasional tree. So it's volcanic and granite. Solid rock, not the types of things that you imagine there being water present for. And so this idea of striking a rock and having water come out would be pretty miraculous. There's nothing there, right? There's very little vegetation, the occasional tree, pretty dry, arid place, volcanic rock, right? No one is going to think that you could just, if you struck the rock and water came out, nobody's going to think that it was just like an everyday occurrence. That's going to be something truly special. Okay, so where did our story take place? Right, we're looking at Kadesh Barnea. So again, we're looking at Wikipedia. So Tel El Kuderat is an archaeological site in the Sinai, about 5 miles east of the Egyptian village of Kusema. It is widely considered to be the location of the biblical Kadesh Barnea. Recently, some authors have referred to it as Tel Kadesh Barnea. Moshe Dotan referred to it as Tel Ein El Kuderat, while in the early 20th century, Woolley and Lawrence used the spelling Tel Ein El Geduat. So Ein is going to be what? It's a spring, like Ein Gedi, right? So, and like Ma'ayan, also like a spring. They're related to one another. So Tel El Kuderat is the name of the archaeological mound, the Tel itself. It sits near Ein El Kuderat, which Carol Redmount describes as the most fertile oasis in the northern Sinai. The Ein, the spring, flows out of the ground about 1.5 kilometers east of the Tel, and the water from it flows west, becoming the Wadi El Kuderat. The Tel then sits along the northern bank of the Wadi, which continues flowing west and then turns toward the north. So if you are in, right, the most fertile oasis in the northern Sinai, and you know that there's a spring underneath the ground there because there's a wadi, there's a creek or a little riverbed, that's running through the area, and somebody then strikes that ground, not so miraculous to strike that ground. It's going to be, expected, more or less. And that's what Malbim is trying to tell us. Again, Malbim, writing 150 years ago, probably hasn't been to this area, probably doesn't know that much of the detail of what we can learn from Wikipedia very quickly, but he does know the difference between a tzur and a sela. And so it's clear, based on what he's telling us, that the ground at Kadesh Barnea is going to be the sela, where there's water within it, and the ground at Refidim is going to be a tzur, hard, nobody would expect water to be there. Any questions before we continue here? Any questions, thoughts, insights? Okay. All right, so we're continuing the journey. We're going to look at what Cleocar has to say. So what was the sin? What exactly was so horrible what was going on here? So when God says, take the staff, ha-mate. If God commanded Moses to speak to the rock, why did Moses need this staff? And why did God say the staff and not your staff? Like what was said in Exodus. Understand that God was speaking of a known staff, right? Mate yadua, one that is widely understood. Right? You don't have to explain because everybody knows. When you say ha-mate, everybody knows what ha-mate is. Understand what we find in Chizkuni's commentary, that this staff was Aaron's, which was placed before God. Now, if you remember, last week, when we had Korach, as a result of this rebellion, there was this kind of test, and God said, Aaron's going to take his staff and put it in the tent of meeting, Ohel Moed, And in the morning, and Korach can put his staff there as well. In the morning, if one of them has sprouted into an almond tree, an almond blossom, then we know that that is the true chosen, servant of God, and not the other. And so we know that Aaron's staff, in the morning, everybody comes in, it has all these almond blossoms. Excuse me, one second. Okay. Okay. Maybe. I think my throat's a bit dry from the hike. So understand what we find, right? That the staff was Aaron's, which was placed before God. It was completely dry wood without any moisture. Right? Nobody's going to be carrying around green wood for their staff. You want something solid and dry and strong, so it's not going to bend if you're using it as a walking staff or whatever. It was completely dry wood without any moisture, yet it blossomed. And nothing can blossom without water. Rather, God decreed that the dry wooden staff would bring forth water and blossom. And God wanted Moses to take Aaron's staff, show it to the people, and say, just as God brought water forth from this dry wood, so too God will bring water forth from this dry rock. And just so happens, and then skip down, there's a lot of additional, like Cleocar is very long-winded here. And in Gematria, the numerical value of the word eitz, wood, and sela, rock, are the same. Right? So that's how we understand that this idea of this wood and the rock both being dry, both are going to be bringing forth water. That's this kind of miracle. And so what we see happens is, let's go back to the very beginning. Okay. So God says, take the rod, the staff. There's no question. In Exodus, when he says, take your staff, we know what staff he's talking about. But here it says, the staff, it must be the one that we literally just read about in the last week's Parsha, just before all this is happening anyways. And it's sitting there in the Ohel Moed anyways. It's sitting there before God. Right? So he says, take that. Right? You're going to speak to the rock. It doesn't say strike the rock like it says in Exodus. It says speak to the rock. And we understand this rock here is Sela. And so if you were to strike it, as Malbim explains, it's not going to be that miraculous for water to come forth. What happens then? So Moses took the rod, he brought it, and probably the people are still complaining about whatever else they've been complaining about for the last several weeks, because they're fetching a lot. And we have to remember that all the 250 former leaders were killed in the Korach rebellion. So now we have a whole new group of leaders who have gathered around, people who have not necessarily witnessed God's miracles, have not necessarily witnessed, the miracles of the Aseret Makot, of the 10 plagues, and coming out of Egypt. So here they need to be reminded, God does these miraculous things, and they probably don't even remember from Moses striking the rock before. So they're still complaining. He's like, look at this staff. It's turned into an almond tree. You're still complaining? And so Moses loses his patience. He doesn't take Aaron's staff because it's now an almond tree. It wouldn't be that easy to turn around and hit. He takes his staff and he strikes the rock, not once, but twice. Right? You hit a rock once and water comes out. All right, that's pretty cool. Right? But it's still, you probably knew where it was. You hit it twice. Okay, you're really beating this ground. Of course water's going to come out. There's no question what Moses has done is stolen God's thunder. Right? God said the whole point of this was for the people to understand that I can do these miracles. And just like Moses and Aaron weren't at all in the Ohel Moed overnight when this staff turned into an almond tree, therefore they weren't responsible for it. God was responsible for it. Here too, God told me to speak to the rock and just say, give forth your water. And it's not me doing anything, it's God making the rock bring forth its water. And so when Moses then turns around and strikes the rock, what he's done is he's taken away this opportunity for the Israelites to be awed by God. So when God says, you did not trust me, and lo Right? You didn't have this faith in me that I'd be able to make things happen. And maybe if you actually did what I said to do, maybe that would have gotten all these people to shut up and stop complaining, but you didn't trust. Right? Lo hamantem bi l'haktisheni le'enei b'nei Yisrael. And you didn't make me holy in the eyes of the Israelites. Right? What you just did is you elevated yourself. You made yourself look special and cool, not me, God. And even that didn't make yourself look that cool, because most people who have any sense of geology could just, strike the ground and get some water to come out of it. So going back to Phil's question, and point earlier, was this punishment of not allowing Moses into the land of Israel fair punishment for this act? And, what he's done is all these other things that have happened through the wandering in the desert, God's biggest complaint is that the people don't have faith in God. They don't believe in God. They don't have this trust. And those people were told they had to kind of die off. They didn't have this faith that they could actually make it into the land. And even the 12 spies, the 12 scouts, 10 of them who didn't have faith, they were not allowed to come into the land. Only the 2 who did have faith were allowed to come in. And here you have Moses, who not only himself didn't have faith in God, but took away the opportunity for all these other leaders to have faith in God as well, right? Of course the punishment is fitting that he shouldn't be able to go into land, because you need somebody who is brave, someone who is bold, somebody who has that faith and trusts that things will happen, because that's the person that people want to follow. A very, worried, cautious, overly cautious, scared leader. They want somebody who's going to be that brave and bold person. And Moses not only lost his cool with the people, right, but he lost his cool with God. And that's why he was punished. Yeah, Phil.
With all due respect, Rabbi, the people that Moses is talking to at that point, the people that he showed the example to, they were told in the parsha about the spies, when the spies happened, that they weren't going to enter the land of Israel anyway. So the people that he got angry at were the same people that God got angry at, because they believed those 10 spies. So we're talking about the same people. We're not talking about the new generation.
This is a different group of people still, right? Because
no, it's just those people. The new people that you say he's talking to, the new 250, let's say, they are all going to die. They aren't going to enter the land of Israel either. They're not the ones.
Not necessarily. We don't necessarily know of these new leaders if they were born in Egypt, and therefore they are also part of the generation that's not going to be allowed in, or not. But either way, even if they are part of that generation that was born in Egypt and are not allowed to enter the land of Israel, they still have children of their own, right? And here's an opportunity for them to see something miraculous and amazing, then to be able to pass on to their children. You should always remember what I saw with my own eyes, and have faith in God. And here, yes, there was a different group of people who fetched before, and they were all wiped out. So we knew those people were, right? They were convinced by the 10 scouts that they couldn't do it. And because of them, all those leaders, right? When we say kahal, we're not talking about all of the children of Israel. We're talking about this group of leaders that have gathered around. So this group of leaders, the first group, they lost their cool. They didn't have faith to be able to make it. They were all wiped out. Anyways, right? And because those are the same people who gathered around with Korach and the rebellion. They're gone. And then we have this new group of leaders who have gathered around, and here's an opportunity for them to see something really amazing and have faith. They don't necessarily do anything wrong, right? Those people aren't doing anything wrong at this point. They might be kvetching, but they haven't, lost faith per se in God at this point. But Moses has prevented them from being able to strengthen their resolve and be able to then teach that onto their children, so the next generation of leaders that would come up would have this faith. Right? Moses, really, he stole God's glory. And that ain't cool for the person who's supposed to be the man of God.
And so then why isn't, oh, I'm sorry, but I'm just asking, why isn't the fact that the people actually got the water considered by the commentators that, this was you may not think it's miraculous because the water at the at the Sela was very accessible, but the people didn't see it. They couldn't see it, and Moses allowed them to see it, and they got the water they needed to survive.
Yeah,
None of that, to me, that's the critical point.
but no, that's actually not the critical point. Right? The critical point is how they got the water. Just getting the water, not so important. Like, yeah, we need the water. Okay. And the people want to make sure they have water, so Moses can get the water from them. And really, it was Miriam's responsibility. Miriam dies later in this parsha. But it's Miriam's responsibility to get the water. That doesn't happen. Moses is the one who does this, and he loses his cool. But even still, all right, so just getting water isn't what's important. What's important is how that water is acquired. And again, the people seeing water come out of the ground where they already know that there is water, it's just not miraculous, right? I mean, there are plenty of places where you can be hiking and the water table is pretty low, and you just, it reminds me of one of my favorite jokes. Why is it never flood in France? Because the water is always low. The water.
Okay. I have something, but Carol, you should have your chance. I'm sorry.
This morning I was in a Torah study.
The dirt, and some water will bubble up. That's not too miraculous. Yeah, Carol.
Yeah, so there was some discussion about Moses striking the rock so hard, and could that have been or considered a grief reaction after his sibling had passed away when he was so bereft?
She hasn't died yet.
But what about Aaron? Hadn't Aaron?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay.
This was just before.
All right.
So if we can get beyond the point that God can do no wrong, and it's up to us just to try to rationalize and always find a way to justify what God has done. If we can get beyond that, maybe we can never get beyond that point, but that is always, in my view of Torah, going to be there.
I need to correct myself. Carol, you're right. Miriam actually dies just before this, not just after. She dies, that's why they don't have any water, that's why the people are complaining. Right. But we also know Moses is the one who tells Aaron, your son died. Sorry, you still have a job. So get back to work. So I don't think he's necessarily one to mourn in such a way. Yeah.
So my point is, go ahead. Is there more? Carol, did you want to respond? I'm sorry.
What's happening more is he's just losing his cool with this group of people who just keep complaining to him and complaining. And so, yeah.
And when God loses his cool, as happens, it seems to me, in the Korach rebellion, in the situation with the spies, in the sense that the end, what he sees is a greater picture, because it's really important for him to get the right people that have the right attitude and the right faith into Israel, which may only be the children of this generation. When we rationalize that was fine, that was cool, God had the big picture in mind, and he went ahead and did it. And then Moses, who's doing what he needs to do, whether or not you say it's a violation of the orders, and he wasn't carrying out God's commandment. But the bigger picture is the people got the water and they continued on their journey. So to me, if we're using God as a model of behavior, we need to try to understand that behavior in a way, because it could be said that Moses was using God's model, which is basically, guys, look at the end and look at the big picture. And the fact that I'm striking the rock so hard is justifiable because the bigger picture is going to allow our people, they got the water, they're going to continue on. But then to just cut that argument short by saying, God is always right. You just don't understand how God is always right. To me, that goes nowhere. That that doesn't give you that. There's no fun in that. There's no fun in just saying God is always right.
But that doesn't change the fact that Moses' behavior is not necessarily justifiable, right? If you are a leader of a people, you lose your cool and you yell at them, you swear at them, whatever you do, right, it is not unreasonable for those people to want to maybe uproot you and get rid of you. As we are seeing all over the world today, people who are using inappropriate language, have inappropriate actions, they are not tolerated. And maybe there are times when people have been tolerated, more and more, and a lot of people saw that as being like the strong leader, but it's not excusable. And Moses losing his cool and calling these people rebels, where all they're doing is asking for water, right? Morim is, right, he's telling them that they're these kind of horrible people, and they're not. They're just asking for water. And so,
yeah, but the other side of that, this is a buildup of, this is not just this one incident. There's a buildup of complaining and whining that takes place the moment people leave Egypt, and is sick and tired of this whining. And at this, it's the straw that maybe broke the camel's back.
possibly.
And that it had been building up, and he is just really pissed. And he
at that point, you tell the camel, all right, we're going to put you into retirement because you're not working anymore. All right? If you're no longer able to kind of keep that cool, you got to go.
Speaking of God, Rabbi.
We're any other questions or comments or thoughts on?
That's a heavy question.
So I'm going to say farewell to everybody. Hope you have a wonderful day. God willing, I will be coming at you for Shabbat from the wilderness somewhere.
Oh.
But either way, so have a great rest
of all the fish you catch. Please do that. And one other thing, just to